Hey guys, Nomalanga, I'm Charlie Moses here. Okay, so I'm still getting set up a little bit. Just bear with me. I have you here, and I also want to try and use this screen here to read your comments as we go along. Sometimes when I'm doing a live and I'm trying to also read the comments on the screen, it just gets it gets next to impossible. So I want to try and do that today. So just bear with me for a second. If you haven't already, please go to flynubianqueen.com and subscribe. You can also text the word Queens to 31996. And you will receive text alerts when the Queens go live on the channel. So welcome. I am Nomalanga. This is the Nomalanga Show, and we are live at flynubianqueen.com. I have an interesting topic. I actually meant to discuss this yesterday, but I wasn't feeling well, but I think it's still relevant today. I have a few thoughts on this. It's about Wendy Williams, and she apparently went on some talk shows. And when she was on, let's see where she was talking to Andy Cohen. She actually admitted that she knew that her husband was living a double life for years before she eventually divorced him. So we will talk about that in just a second. Let me, just like I said, please bear with me. I want to pull up this live somewhere else so I can see your comments as we go along. And I just don't see it. I'm not sure why. Let me try harder. How about that? Thank you for joining. Oh, there it is. Okay, let me play it and see if it works. Okay. So feel free to interact, guys. I would like this to be an interactive show. What I'm doing is I'm going to read the article. The article came from Entertainment Tonight. I'll just quickly read the article so we're dealing with the same information. I think I've successfully pulled it up where I can read your comments. Okay. So Wendy Williams is explaining why it took so long to split from her husband, Kevin Hunter, even though she says she knew about his quote-unquote double life. The 50-year-old talk show host who filed for divorce in April answered some tough questions during an interview with Andy Cohen on his Sirius XM channel Radio Andy, including addressing claims that Hunter was unfaithful and fathered a child with another woman. Quote, I'd come in, my eyes would be puffy from crying, end quote. She recalled of going into work at the Wendy Williams show when things were really bad in her marriage. As for why she stayed with Hunter for as long as she did, Williams said, I knew that I would have to address it, but I had to get my ducks in a row. I knew a lot of things for years but my son, Kevin Hunter Jr., was at home. It wasn't fair to him. She added, I'm not going to grab his hand and flee the scene and move zip codes, end quote. Now that her son is away at college, Williams says it's been easier to live a single lifestyle. Quote, the person I am now is very single because he's not living with me, she notes. He goes to school in Miami. Cohen then inquired as to whether Williams would have stayed with Hunter had pics of him with another woman not been released. She says, I would have known anyway. I had my own. Meaning she had her own pictures. She added, no, I can't take a lot, but I'm not raising a family. And assuming she means another family that her husband created somewhere else. In addition to addressing the rumors about her split from Hunter, Williams set this record straight on reports that she had a fling with rapper Meek Mill. I don't really care about this and it's not relevant, but anyway. She says, I wasn't making out with Meek Mill. I was whispering in his ear and I kissed him on the cheek because he performed at my son's black mitzvah, she explained. I'm not feeling for Meek Mill and he's not feeling for me. She's also been dating since her split from Hunter and apparently has been open about her love life on her show. And you could watch her video to see her tease a romance with a quote-unquote very sexy mystery man. Okay, my disclaimer, guys, as always, is I'm not really all that interested in discussing Wendy Williams. I don't know her and I don't really know her life apart from reading this article. But I think that sometimes celebrities give us some good topics to chew on. And that's where I'm going with this conversation. She says that she knew about her husband's double life. And that always begets the question, why would you stay? Why would you stay with a man that you knew was leading some other life that you didn't approve of and that you didn't agree to? Now, let's also understand that we are assuming she didn't agree to it. She may very well have, and I'll discuss that in a second. Galen Green says, one thing I got to say, and that's it, and that's all. You're one fine sister. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so hi guys. Let's jump into the topic. I came up with a few points about why a woman would stay in a marriage when she knew, or if she knew, that her husband was carrying on with somebody else or was living some other life that they did not agree to. So the first thing is, and actually Wendy Williams mentioned this. She says that her child was an issue, and she said, I couldn't just up and leave and change zip codes with my child while he was there. So she would be displacing his life. You know, if he was in school, he'd have to change schools. So that adds some kind of trauma and instability to children, and she was taking that. And I commend her for that, because it's a very responsible and mature thing to do, to consider the stability of your home and the stability of your children before you up and leave. Deshawn says, it's because people leave at their own time and have a breaking point. That is also true, but I think that there's a little more to it than that. And like I said, the first thing that Wendy mentioned was her child. And oftentimes, I'm a mother of 3 children, 4 actually, if you count my stepchild. And that's one of the things that's always on the forefront of any decision that you make. You're thinking about your children, you're thinking about their stability, you're thinking about the impact leaving will have on them, and you really, really have to think long and hard before you make any decision. Florida says, I stayed too long when I was married. I finally woke up, but at that time I was beyond misery. Yeah, sometimes that's what it is. Like, the pain of staying by far supersedes any pain that you could ever feel for leaving. I totally get that. Okay. So the first reason is children and security for the children. Okay. And Wendy says when her child finally went off to college, she felt like, okay, I stayed as long as I needed to, and now I can do what I need to do. And she did it. Okay. I can respect that. I'm not sure how I feel about Wendy Williams, but I certainly respect the way that she handled the situation in this particular regard. The second thing is, and again, I think she mentioned it here, is sometimes women are planning an exit. Okay, when you marry a person, you tie your life to them so much that leaving is really not an easy thing to do. Oftentimes you have assets together, you're actually emotionally attached to them. Sometimes you're depending on them financially, sometimes they're depending on you financially, as is the case with Wendy Williams and her husband. It's my understanding that he was her manager. So leaving him kind of created this issue where the person who has control over all her shows, her businesses, her platforms, is the person that she's trying to leave, and you can't just undo that quickly. So sometimes you're planning your exit. Sometimes she is planning her exit. That's the second reason. Patricia says, your life is perfect. Mind your damn business. Say what you want. Nobody know what we go through. Patricia, you feel free to go away. My disclaimer at the beginning was that we're not really talking about Wendy Williams. If you understand anything about teaching, is we often have what are called case studies. And a case study will take a real life example and will extract lessons. The idea isn't to talk about the subject of the case study necessarily, but to extrapolate some lessons, okay? So if this bothers you, Patricia, please feel free to go away. I will not be offended. There's up to about 100 people watching, so 99 will still be okay. Thank you. Okay, so on to the next point. Marriage is a lifelong commitment, guys, and sometimes even when something is wrong, there's the mindset that you made a lifelong commitment. And some people in their vows literally say, in sickness and health and blah, 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 till death do us part. Meaning it really doesn't matter what happens. No matter what happens, I'm going to stay. I'm going to stick this out. I'm going to stick to everything. I'm not going to leave no matter what happens. Okay. And sometimes people take that literally. I have to admit that I personally lean towards that belief. I think that the situation has to be extreme in order for you to leave the situation. And I think that, again, before you leave, it has to be very, very well thought out. And you have to have explored many, many avenues of preserving this thing that's supposed to be a lifelong commitment and all the moving parts that are involved in it. So marriage is a lifelong commitment, guys. So if you ever see something, or a marriage or a relationship, really marriage, because relationships don't count, and you really don't understand, why is that woman staying? This happened and that's going on and we can all see it. It's because it's a lifelong commitment. And sometimes what is going on at that time, let's say the year is 2019, they've been married since 2000, they're 19 years in. And maybe they're having one bad year, but they got maybe 19 more years to go. And when you look at it in the full picture, and it's 40 years, they had one bad year or 2 bad years, maybe 5 bad years, 10 bad years. But again, in 40 years, if there's 30 good and 10 bad, now 10 bad, I'm sorry, it just feels like too much. But you get the point that I'm making, is that something that isn't right or is bad in a marriage could be that space of time, and it shouldn't always overshadow the whole relationship, the whole marriage, and all the moving parts. So I think that's how we have to look at it. It's a lifelong commitment, and sometimes there'll be bad times or there'll be tough times, and people can't always walk away. I do, however, advocate walking away if in the grand scheme of things or in the big picture it will be better for everybody. And oftentimes it's because you have to preserve one or all the people in there. If there's something in there that is damaging or that is destructive and it will do more damage to stay than to leave, then I'd advocate leaving. But again, it has to be very well thought out. Franklin says, speak queen. Franklin is tuning in from Fort Worth, Texas. I'm not sure where that is, but we will be in Houston, Texas next month. I will be at the All Black National Convention in Houston, Texas. I believe it starts in the end of September, the 27th of September. You can go to, I think it's at abnc.com. If anybody knows the URL, please pop it in. If not, I'll pop it in at the end. Dennis says, good afternoon from Chicago. Thank you for tuning in, Dennis. Natasha says, everyone has a limit, and maybe your limit is 10, but someone else is 5. Yes, Natasha, I completely agree. I was just saying 10 feels like too much. I don't think that I would be able to handle 10 years of strife and unhappiness and trauma and whatever else it is that is causing a woman to want to leave her situation, or cheating, or whatever the heck it is. I don't think I could handle 10 years. And I'm not saying that anybody should. All I'm saying is that when you look at the bigger picture, sometimes 10 years can seem smaller because there are many other years that were really good years. And maybe those 10 years weren't bad consecutively. Maybe it's 1 year that's bad, then 5 good years, then 1 year that's bad. And the thing about being bad, guys, is we're not just talking about your husband acting horribly or the wife acting horribly. Sometimes a bad year can be somebody gets cancer. And it's a bad year. It's a bad 2 years, 3 years. And just when you think you're over it, it comes back. And it's another bad year, 2 years, okay? So that's what I mean when I say sometimes you have to look at the grand scheme of things and see that, okay, there's been more good than bad. And then also look at the fact that, this is a lifelong commitment, okay? Franklin says about 300 miles north of Houston, so you're far away but still in the same state. Thank you for the quick education. Yes, guys, the point that I was making is marriage is a lifelong commitment. The next point that I wanted to make is that sometimes leaving, there's 5 points, by the way, and this point number 4. Leaving sometimes is worse than staying. A scenario that quickly comes to my mind is sometimes if a woman is completely financially dependent on her husband and she does not have a family support to fall back on. Leaving can feel worse than staying. Staying, you have financial security, you have maybe a home, a house that you've bought together, you have a car, food on the table, and he's a good protector and provider, other than the fact that there's one area in life that he's not meeting the standards or the agreement. Nokutula says, good evening from South Africa. Hi, great to see you. Vanessa says, good afternoon from Baton Rouge. Hi, Vanessa. Thank you for tuning in, guys. We're discussing, even though we're not really discussing her, we're discussing why Wendy Williams knew about her husband's, quote unquote, her words, secret life, and stayed in the marriage. And I've shifted the conversation a little bit to talk about why women in general would stay in a bad situation. And by situation, I mean a bad marriage. The first point I made was that sometimes it's the children. The second point was that sometimes she's just planning her exit and it takes a long time. The third point I made is that marriage is a lifelong commitment. And sometimes people don't understand why you're staying, but sometimes you're just honoring your commitment. And then the fourth point, which I was on, was that sometimes leaving is worse than staying. And even with physical abuse and emotional abuse, sometimes, even though it's hard to understand, actually leaving can seem harder than staying, because oftentimes with emotional and physical abuse, there's an eroding of the woman's self-esteem and sense of self-worth, confidence. She's going through so much that she just doesn't have what it takes to be out there in the world by herself, because this person that she's with has eroded her for years, and he's told her over and over, you can't do it without me, you're nothing, you know, you're useless, all these other things. Abuse, that's the nature of abuse. And when a woman thinks about leaving, she can't. I won't start rumors that I don't know about Wendy Williams, but I do remember hearing about abuse in their relationship as well, reading about it years ago, and she, you know, denied it and covered it up. And again, that's also symptomatic of a woman that's in an abusive relationship. She typically won't make it public because, you know, there's shame and actually fear of the person who's abusing her. Let's see the comments. Okay, so I'm caught up with the comments. And then the last reason, guys, is that sometimes, and people don't like it when this kind of stuff is brought up, sometimes there's silent negotiations that are going on, unspoken negotiations. So there are things that she knows that he puts up with that he shouldn't put up with from her. So when he goes and does something that she doesn't approve of or really shouldn't put up with, she puts up with it. So that's almost like a silent negotiation. You turn a blind eye to something because you understand that your partner's also turning a blind eye to something about you. Sometimes it's not something real. You know, I've heard of women who, you know, after getting married, they don't look like the pretty lady they were when they got married. You know, they gained weight. They don't look like what they look like, and they feel like, wow, I'm not the person I used to be, but here he is sticking with me and he puts up with me. I'm not saying it's okay, but that's how some women feel. So if he stays and the marriage is maintained, he's still a good provider, he still comes home every night, the family stays together, then she'll turn a blind eye to something that he's doing that she doesn't approve of, because she thinks that he's also turning a blind eye to the ways in which she is not meeting his expectations. Natasha says marriage is a contract. It's an agreement, yes, and I think it's subject to negotiations. And like I said, some negotiations are, we're upfront, we're saying what we want, we're compromising, it's a give and take and so on. But sometimes it's a very silent give and take. And sometimes that means that there's there's these little, they're not really, yeah, they're silent negotiations. You just realize that there's some things that you've been making your partner put up with, and so when they go and they do something that maybe you don't approve of, you kind of turn a blind eye to it, because they turn a blind eye to your flaws or your faults. And again, that's not always nice for people to want to hear. And another thing, I'm finished with my points, and I want to put something out there, guys. Like, I notice with the difference, I spend a lot of time, my home for the last over 20 years has been the United States of America. I lived in Rhode Island, I lived in Florida, I lived in New York, and for the last 10, 11 years, we've lived in Boston, Massachusetts. But I'm saying all that to say that I spent most of my life all my adult life, living in the United States. But my country of birth is Botswana. So I've visited Botswana a lot. I'm in Botswana right now. And one of the things that I noticed, that there's this difference between the women in the black women in America and the women here in Botswana and other African countries. The women in the African American women, or the black women in America, get raging mad at the idea of being cheated on. I mean, they take it so personally, like they're going to kill somebody, or they're going to burn the house down, or whatever it is. They take it so personally, and I'm not sure why. Because I think that what another person does with their genitals, yes, it affects you, but my goodness, the world is not coming to an end. But I'm saying that to say that I noticed that women in Botswana and maybe some other African countries, yes, of course it hurts. And if you agreed to have a monogamous relationship and be faithful to each other, and somebody breaks that promise, it hurts. But they don't take it as personally. And they don't burn houses down the way that women do in America. So there's a difference there. And I'm saying that to say that sometimes stepping out in the marriage isn't a deal breaker for some people. It's not a deal breaker for some people. There are certain things that they want in a relationship. Maybe it has 10 components and that's the 10th one. And if the other 9 components are in place, if the 10th one isn't, then they can just kind of live with it because they have the other 9 things. It's kind of like when you write down all the things that you want in a mate, and before you even choose your mate, right, or meet them or whatever, you say, I want these 10 things, and you meet somebody and they meet 9 out of 10 of those things, and you decide, you know what, if I got the 9, I can live with not getting the 10th thing, right? So I'm sorry guys, my phone just rang. I can live with not getting the 10th thing, and I will focus and appreciate the other 9 things, right? I'm a little distracted because I'm seeing a lot of comments. Okay. Franklin says that's deep. I'm not sure what he was responding to. Dennis says sometimes when something is amiss in a relationship, it's best to confront it and be honest with yourself. Yes. From the article, she says that she knew some of it, and she says, quote, I knew that I would have to address it, but I had to get my ducks in a row. Sometimes it's just not the time, right? Okay. Vanessa says, yes, Natasha, marriage is a contract, not just a contract, but taking vows before God. But anyone or anything must be honored with this agreement. There are some things that are completely what? Unacceptable. Yes. Ty says, my elders have been married to the same women they had their children by since I was a young boy and long before I was born as well. So I grew up taking marriage very seriously. So with that being said, I'm only getting married once. Soon as I find a queen who's worth worthy with the same marriage morals and life goals as me. I appreciate that. My parents have been together for 50 years and been married for close to that. So I've always also had a very deep appreciation for family and for marriage. And I think that sometimes that's what sets our minds in terms of what we believe in and what we value and appreciate. Patricia said, now there's a topic. I lost interest in anything you have to say earlier, Patricia. Natasha says, a marriage between two people is a contract between those two people. Don't agree, Natasha. If you understand what marriage is about, or how marriage, the institution came about, you'll understand that it's not just about two people. It was actually about two families joining together for security, for wealth, and for power. Okay, so it wasn't just about the two people. The two people were where they joined, but it was about much more than them. And even now, if it's just about two people, once you get together, you have children. So it's not just about the two of you. Should you put your spouse first? Absolutely. Your spouse is more important than anybody else. Because if the marriage breaks down, then everything else that the marriage is supporting also breaks down. So I get that part. But the marriage isn't just about the two people. There's a broader picture. We're building wealth, we're building families, and we're raising exceptional children. So it's not just only about the two people. Natasha says the terms are agreed upon by those two people. Only they know those terms. Again, don't agree. And again, if you look at the African traditional system, when there's a breakdown in a marriage, they usually invite their elders to mediate and to bring them together and to help them understand that they're in this with them. I'm not talking about interfering mother-in-laws and other relatives. I'm talking about preserving the sanctity and the value, the great value that comes with marriage. And it always extends beyond just two people. If it was just about two people and feeling in love, when the love goes, then what do you have left? For most people, it's nothing, and then they separate and go their separate ways. So it has to be about more than just two people and what they agree on and how they feel. Vanessa says, we heard you the first time, Natasha. Stop repeating yourself. We read this already. Your opinion is still honored, but to keep repeating it, well, it's your opinion. It's okay. I don't mind, and I hope that when we do these lives and we have these discussions, we keep an open mind. I hope that you guys understand that this wasn't really about Wendy Williams or somebody who got nasty in the beginning and says, mind your own business. It's never about that, guys. I want us to have open discussions, and I think that sometimes we can actually change the way we see things through these discussions. So that's all I have for today. Just wanted to share those points. Guys, if you haven't already, please subscribe to Fly Nubian Queen. You can go to flynubianqueen.com. If you haven't already, again, you can send the word queens, text it to 31996, and you'll get text alerts when the queens are live at the Fly Nubian Queen channel. If you've just joined us, guys, I'm afraid we're on our way out. I am Nomalanga. This is the Nomalanga Show. And before I go, I always have one plea. Like I mentioned, I'm right now in Botswana and working on my charity, or our charity, because I didn't start it by myself. We have a charity here, and it started because we became aware that there are young girls here in Botswana and other rural areas in other countries who miss school because they don't have sanitary pads when they have their monthly menstruation every month. So they miss school every month. And it isn't just only about school. They miss other social events. They don't leave the house. They don't leave the home because they don't have pads, and they're not comfortable with it. So what we do is we supply free pads to them every single month. And we've been doing this now for just a few months, and the support has been amazing. I want to thank those of you who have donated. I can't thank you enough. You can go to padsforourgirls.com, padsforourgirls.com. If you happen to be in Botswana, you can actually donate actual pads. If you're not, you go to padsforourgirls.com. You can donate as little as $3. One time every month. We prefer if you donate a small amount every month rather than a big amount one time, because our girls need our help every single month. So Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Again, my name is Nomalanga. This is the Nomalanga Show, and we have been live at the Fly Nubian Queen channel. Just before I leave, Mr. Jonathan Green, I see your compliment. Thank you so much. Vanessa, I see your comment too. Open discussion is healthy. Thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in, guys. It's been great. Come back. I'll be here as often as I can be, which is every day. Okay. It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.